In this video, we'll talk a little bit more about what the direction of causation model is saying and where the information comes from to estimate the different parameters and think about the bigger picture. Currently, the model is unidentified. This means that there are more parameters than can be uniquely estimated from the data. A necessary but not sufficient condition for a model to be identified is that there are at least as many informative statistics as there are parameters to be estimated under the model. Let's look at the covariance matrices for MZ and DZ twins. Since these matrices are symmetric, I've just annotated the bottom diagonal of each matrix. Looking at these matrices, we might naively think that there are 20 observed statistics to play with. However, not all these 20 statistics are informative for our models. Let's take a look. First of all, our models assume that there are no differences in variance between twin 1 and twin 2 for variable YA, and no differences between MZ and DZ twins in terms of their variance of variable YA. The variances for variable YA sit along the diagonals of the MZ and DZ covariance matrices indicated by the red crosses. So the four entries in the variance-covariance matrices that refer to the variance of variable YA only provide us with one piece of information. What do I mean when I say our models assume that there are no differences in variance between twin 1 and twin 2 for variable YA, and no differences between MZ and DZ twins in terms of their variance of variable YA? Well, what I mean is that if you look at the formula for the variance of YA, this is the same across twin 1 and twin 2, and across MZ and DZ twins. In fact, the expected variance is equal to the formula that you see in the red box in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I'm not going to go through the derivation of the expected variance formally, but hopefully it's clear intuitively from looking at the path diagram that the variance of variable YA is the same for twin 1 and for twin 2 for both MZ and DZ twins, just by looking at the symmetry of the path model. In other words, what you see on the left-hand side of the diagram is repeated on the right-hand side of the diagram. And the different correlation coefficients between MZ and DZ twins don't come into calculation of the expected variances of the variables. Next, we have the variance of variable Y subscript B. The entries are indicated by the red X's on the main diagonal of the covariance matrices. Again, the same argument applies. One additional piece of information from 4 more entries. So now we have 2 pieces of information from our 2 variance-covariance matrices. The next piece of information comes from the cross-trait covariance. This is simply the within-person covariance between the 2 observed variables YA and YB. These entries sit just below the main diagonal, and are indicated by the green X's on the slide. Again, this statistic doesn't vary across twin 1 or twin 2, or across MZ or DZ twins. So again, 4 of those entries in the variance-covariance matrices only provide us with one piece of information. We now have a total of 3 pieces of information. Next are the covariances between twin 1 and twin 2 on both the variables of interest. Going through the slide, we have the covariance between MZ twins for variable YA, the covariance between MZ twins for variable YB, and the covariance between DZ twins for variable YA, and the covariance between DZ twins for variable YB. Here we do expect MZ and DZ twins to have different covariances. And of course, we expect that covariance will be different for variable YA and for variable YB. Thus, 4 entries of the variance-covariance matrices provide us with information on 4 parameters. We now have a total of 7 pieces of information. Finally, we have the cross-twin, cross-trait covariances. The cross-twin, cross-trait covariance is the covariance between twin 1 variable YA and twin 2 variable YB, or equivalently, between twin 1 variable YB and twin 2 variable YA. The cross-twin, cross-trait covariances shouldn't vary within twins, but should differ between MZ and DZ twins, and thus provide a final 2 pieces of information, making a total of 9 pieces of information from our observed variance-covariance matrices. As we will soon see, it's the cross-twin, cross-trait covariances that provide us with information to determine the direction of causation in our models. So that's 9 pieces of information, allowing us to estimate 9 parameters in total. One option would be to not worry about causality at all and fit the most general twin model possible to the data. In other words, the general bivariate model as shown in this slide. Only one twin is shown in the diagram for simplicity. Variable YA is shown on the left and variable YB on the right. You could easily imagine another co-twin to the side of this path model with double-headed arrows linking the respective latent variables of the twins with covariances according to biometrical theory. But this makes the diagram cluttered very quickly. The general bivariate twin model uses all 9 pieces of information to estimate 9 parameters. In this case, 3 path coefficients, or variance components, for variable YA, 3 path coefficients for variable YB, and 3 correlations across the latent factors. However, we can also model whether the covariance between our 2 observed variables is entirely a result of causal processes. This is where the direction of causation twin model comes in. Given we have 9 pieces of information it's clear now that we only have enough information to estimate a maximum of 9 parameters in total. So investigators have to make a decision regarding what parameters they will drop from the model. Since it's not possible to estimate 4 latent sources of variation using just MZ and DZ twins, the first thing we'll do is drop dominance genetic effects from variable YA and common environmental effects from variable YB. Like so. We've therefore reduced the number of parameters we are estimating by 2. This is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. It's worth appreciating for a moment that whilst in univariate classical twin models you can only fit an ACE or ADE model, in the bivariate case it is perfectly acceptable to fit an ACE structure to one variable and an ADE structure to the other variable if the pattern of correlations indicate that. But we still have too many parameters to estimate as part of this model, so need to make some further constraints. Something else we can do is to drop the measurement error terms from the model. Like so. Now we have 2 fewer parameters to estimate again. As we'll discuss later, not modeling measurement error in the direction of causation twin model is problematic for a number of reasons. But for the moment, our interest is just on making the model identifiable. So now we estimate 3 path coefficients for variable YA, 3 path coefficients for variable B, and 2 path coefficients modeling the reciprocal causal relationship between observed variables A and B. That means we are estimating 8 parameters in total using 9 pieces of information. Now it can be shown that the reciprocal direction of causation model is nested within the more general bivariate twin model we discussed earlier. This means that we can also test the reciprocal causation model against an appropriate, more general bivariate twin model. The following sequence of slides shows how direction of causation models can be tested in reference to the full bivariate twin model. So let's say we have 2 variables, YA and YB, and the pattern of correlations indicate that an ACE model is most appropriate for both variables. We can fit this general model like so. It's then possible to test the fit of the reciprocal causation model against the more general full bivariate model using a log likelihood ratio chi-square test with 1 degree of freedom. We can then test whether it is possible to drop one or the other causal path from the reciprocal model. Note that the unidirectional models are not nested within each other and so can't be directly compared in terms of their log likelihoods, but they can be compared using other measures of model fit, like AUC. Finally, we can test the hypothesis that there is not correlation between observed variables YA and YB. Okay, now that we have an idea of what the direction of causation twin model is, in the next video, I'm going to talk about where the information comes from in order to draw causal inferences using the direction of causation twin model.